Welcome to the AI Surge podcast, where we explore how AI is shaping industries and accelerating innovation. I'm your host, Serge Upel, and today I'd like to welcome everyone to Robert Siciliano, who is the #1 best-selling author, known as the strategic human firewall and founder of Protect Now LLC out of Boston, Massachusetts. Robert, I'm looking forward to a great conversation today.
Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity. Me too.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, I was on your website, and for our viewers, protectnowllc.com, but I'll leave those in the short show notes as well. But just great content on there. And I know you've got a brilliant YouTube clip that kind of overviews kind of the gaps and what to watch for in cybersecurity. I just want to tell the audience, Robert is a subject matter expert, a leader in this industry. So we're thrilled to have you, Robert. And I'd love to start with just your journey. So, Robert, to where you've kind of developed your expertise into somebody who's a #1 best-selling author and speaks very eloquently on YouTube. How did that journey all start?
So I've been doing what I do for about 40 years, actually, since I was a teen, professionally for a little bit over 30. And I saw back in the day, when I say back in the day, like in the 90s, that cybercrime was going to be a thing due to the fact that my own small business got hacked. Now, a lot of people that get into various spaces are, usually from some type of life event, right? And I'm no different in that regard. For me, it really started off way before then. When I was 12, my dad let my brother and I, who was 8 at the time, head into downtown Boston to do some shopping. And, back then you could do that. You could just let your kids out the door. They, at 7 o'clock in the morning, they come back at 7 o'clock at night. You have no idea where they are throughout the day. And, they come home all scarred and bleeding or whatever. And like, okay, yeah, how was your day? Well, that's what we did. And so, we got on the train, get out at Washington Street in downtown Boston, and 5 kids are waiting on the platform for us, and they beat us up and took our money. That was my first experience with a multiple attack situation. Not my last, actually, but my first experience with predators and thieves. And so that experience, my dad, when I got home, he's like, oh, yeah, today you were the rabbit and those boys were the wolves. And I'm like, all right, like I didn't quite get it, but I kind of understood. And then about a year later, I was 13. I met a girl at summer camp. Lots of kids went to camp, and, we liked each other. It was like my first crush. And one day we get off the bus and we go to her house, and we're sitting on her front stairs outside. And she looks at me like all solemn, and she says, I think you should know that my mother's boyfriend assaulted me. And I didn't know what she was talking about. I just knew it was bad. So I go home and I ask my dad what happened to this girl, and he's like, sexual assault. And so I learned about sexual assault and the birds and the bees in the exact same conversation. So that kind of had a profound effect in the way I viewed the world. So from that point on, I started to teach personal protection. Personal protection became a thing that I did in my teens. By my early 20s, I had a business where I spoke to real estate agents on personal protection because realtors in the U.S. are murdered. And so I was delivering presentations to real estate associations, and I had a small business set up online where I was also selling personal protection products, pepper sprays, stun guns, stuff like that online. I started that early. I was online when most people, were just using a dial-up connection to AOL, and so was I. I had the ability to accept credit cards in order to sell the products. And my computer got hacked in such a way where I suffered thousands of dollars in credit card fraud, 1995. So my business was personal protection, personal security, violence prevention. And that also includes theft prevention, muggers and thieves and burglaries and such. But when I was robbed, essentially, online, and it wasn't even like online, it was like AOL. That's how you coined the internet. It was AOL. When that happened, I lost all that money. As upset as I was, like I was enamored by it. Like what they did was awesome. It was awful, but it was awesome. Like how'd they do that, And so as I began to research it and understand it, it wasn't really a problem as of yet at the time. Like getting to explain to my bank what happened to me was a difficult thing to do because they didn't quite understand it either. It was such a new issue. But as I started to research it, I started to understand that it's becoming a problem. And so identity theft at the time there wasn't even a law on the books that made it illegal. back in the mid 90s. And it wasn't until like the late 90s that data breaches and identity theft actually started to become a problem that the media started to speak to. And back then, I was one of the only people that was actually talking about it because it had happened to me. And in the mid 90s, like I had written a book, 1995. I was on the Montel Williams show. I was on Howard Stern a couple of times. I'd done like most of the major talk shows back in the day, CNN, Good Morning America, Today Show and such. And so when it hit, I had already been talking about this stuff now, like personal protection for like, 5 or 6 years. And when 9/11 hit, like what I had to say at the time now mattered and now had, weight, so to speak. And shortly after that, data breaches started to get national attention. You'd start to see like a California university had 600,000 records compromised in like 2003, right? And that would make national news. And they'd call me to talk about it. Like, what does this mean? How does this affect us? How does it affect the identities of the people whose information was compromised and so forth? So I had an understanding of the media, the topic and such. And so since that time, I've been talking about this program, this issue in a program that I present professionally for 30 plus years. And what has changed over the years is that criminals treat fraud as a business. What's not changed is consumers, everyday people, don't look at security any differently today than they did back then. And what that primarily means is our digital literacy today, compared to 30 years ago, is no more advanced now than it was back then. And what that basically means is that, like, we don't generally do with our devices as far as securing them any more than we actually need to, that like we're required to do. Like we don't like do a deep dive on any of this stuff at all because we only spend the amount of time, energy, and effort to navigate our devices and the security of them to the extent that we have to. We just don't lend a lot of mind share to it. And that means that the criminals have an advantage because we are no more cyber secure or digitally literate today than we were 30 years ago. And the criminals have figured that out in such a way where they know that they send us a text message that says, "Hey, are we meeting for lunch tomorrow?" And you're like, "I'm sorry, who's this?" Just by responding, who's this, means you don't already know that that's a criminal enterprise in Southeast Asia that's targeted you. They have your number. They know who you are. They're on your Facebook page. And they already know who your friends and family are. And they're reaching out to them too. And we don't know any of that stuff because we've never lent any mind share to learning about it, to understanding it. And we're just being targeted like sitting ducks. And the criminals are as organized as they've ever been. They're making billions of dollars. And when people are hacked, they're like, how did that happen? Well, there's a logical explanation as to how it happened. But most people have never spent a minute trying to figure it out. And I've spent a lifetime explaining it. And here we are today.
Well, it's so funny. You're bang on. We do like the bare minimum almost, whatever we're prompted with our mobiles to set up a password. It's typically very simple. And then we just want to use the thing, right? But it's funny how you mentioned that there's it can happen to me syndrome a little bit until it does, right? And then is that when people take action?
So here's what I do in my presentations to answer your question, right? I get in front of a live audience and my job is to like make people care about security. That's my job. It's not just do this, don't do that, or else. This is why, to get them to care about security so that they look at risk as something that they want to understand, that they want to solve, right? And so by doing that, I ask them a series of questions. My presentations are a dialogue versus, a lot of security people that do what I do, it's like a monologue. They're telling people what to do. Whereas I'm having a conversation with them as to, let's have this conversation about what is risk and why, who the bad actors are, why they target you, why you are an attractive target, and what you can do to harden yourself as a target so that they unfortunately are going to choose somebody else because they're always going to choose somebody else. And so I do that by asking a series of questions. This is the dialogue. Okay, so the questions are like, so how many of you can honestly say that you're using a different passcode across all your critical accounts. If I get 15% of the room to raise their hand, yeah, I'm using a different passcode, that's a lot, which means 85% are using the same passcode today as they were 20 years ago, right? And then the next question is, how many of you use two-factor authentication where you get like a one-time text message to your phone for all your critical accounts? If I get 20% of the room, that's a lot. Two factors required in a lot more locations, which is why, you know? So that means like 80 to 90% of the room are using the same passcodes across multiple accounts and not using two-factor authentication. And the bad guys know that like right now, they can go to the dark web, I can go to the dark web, you can go to the dark web, and I can get 15 billion stolen passwords off the dark web. 15 billion. On this device that I'm broadcasting from, I've got 22 million email addresses and their associated passcodes that I downloaded from the dark web. 22 million. People go, "Oh, those poor 22 million people." I'm like, "Yeah, that's you. That's me. That's all of us. It's everybody." You know? And so as I'm asking these questions and point out 15 billion passcodes on the dark web, they're like, "Oh, that's me too? Okay, so what do I got to do?" So now like they're beginning to realize this does affect them, okay? And in that line of questioning, I asked them, "Okay, so how many of you lock the doors to your home?" I might get like 80% of the room, but you know, a good 20 to 30% still don't. You know, I work with realtors all the time, and they tell me like we sell homes all the time, and we ask the homeowner for the keys when we sell the house. They have no idea where the keys are. They haven't seen the keys in 30 years because people just don't lock their doors, right? And one of the questions I ask is, how many of you have a home security system? And so that's an interesting question because I might get 15, 20% of the room to raise their hand, which means 80% don't. And I explain, okay, well, do you know that in the US every year, between like 1.5 and 2 million homes are burglarized every single year. That means like in the next decade, that's like a million, and that's like 15 to 20 million homes in the next 10 years, you know, are burglarized. And I say, like, you probably had a general understanding of this. I mean, you see the commercials online, like of the companies that sell the, you know, alarm systems. Why have you decided not to install one? And the answers that I always get are the same. They say, well, we don't have a home security system because we have insurance, as if insurance is going to protect you, you know? Or, well, we don't have one because my husband says if the bad guys are going to break in, they're going to break in. There's really not much we can do. And I'm like, all right, that's a pretty fatalist attitude. Like, so what happens if they break in while you're home, in bed, and they got a knife? If they're going to break in, they're going to break in. What am I going to do? Like, that's really your perspective? Okay, all right, I get it. And I know, like, this is what they think. And so the next question, so the next answer is, well, we don't have a home security system primarily because I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live like that, they say. And I go, what does that actually mean? Well, I don't want to have to worry. I just want to be free. I don't want to be paranoid. I don't want to have to think about those things. That's the most common answer. And what that really means is they're saying, I would prefer to function in denial. I would prefer to not think about these things, to not have to worry about it. I don't want to live in fear. I just don't want to have to come home every day and there be a keypad that I have to disarm that reminds me that there are bad people out there doing bad things, which is kind of comical and kind of unfortunate. But that's how people view security, as it is a bad thing. And there's a couple of reasons behind that, okay? I'm a guy that has 20 plus security cameras, which is true. Inside and outside my house, in total, 20 plus security cameras. So not knowing what I do for a living, let's say, right? You see like your neighbor's got 20 plus security cameras, whatever. Like, what might be your first inclination as to my disposition, the way I view the world? I wake up every day, I get out of bed. I must be what? That was a question.
You must be protecting yourself or paranoid.
Good answer. Or paranoid. Is that what you said?
You're right.
Yeah. So the paranoid part, that is people's most common response to that question or to that statement. You must be paranoid. Paranoia, as you probably know, is a mental health disease. It's a disease of the mind, right? And people who suffer from that disease truly do believe that others are out to get them. I mean, I have a first cousin, the poor kid. I think right now she might be living in her car. Her meds just really never took hold. She's always had this disease ever since we were kids. She treated it with alcohol, and she got married. She has a couple of kids. She truly thinks that her kids are out to get her. Her husband's out to get her. She's in her car because she can't deal with the world around her. That's paranoia. We treat security as if it is paranoia. We look at risk as he must think people are out to get him. He must always worry. He's paranoid. It's as if we use paranoia as this bad thing to justify why we don't engage in risk management. I don't want to have to think about those things. It's not going to happen to me anyways. And we function in denial. And denial actually is this wonderful thing that humans possess that allows us psychologically to defend ourselves emotionally, psychologically, from anxiety, from threats, from risk. We would rather think it can't happen to me. And that's pretty much what we default to do. That why would they attack me? Why would they steal my identity? Why would they break into my house? It only happens to other people, and it's what we do, and if you're watching the 6 o'clock news and something bad and tragic happens in a neighborhood somewhere, to this very day, right now, you watch the 6 o'clock news tonight and something bad happens, and then the local news channel sends a journalist in, a reporter, with a microphone and a camera guy and a guy with a fuzzy mic, and they knock on the neighbor's door, and the neighbor comes outside and they're interviewing the neighbor. What does the neighbor always say about what happened in the neighborhood? That was a question.
It doesn't happen here. It happens everywhere else, but not in my neighborhood.
Yeah, they always have the same answer, right? It's a categorically across the board to this very day, right? And that's how we are. We don't want to think it'll ever happen here. We don't even think it's even possible that it could happen here. And therefore, we just don't think about it, don't do anything about it, don't lock our doors, don't install the home security system, don't freeze our credit to protect our identities, don't change our passcodes, don't set up two-factor authentication. We don't do any of that stuff because we don't want to think or believe it can happen to us. And that is all because we as humans trust by default. And what does that mean? It means that when we are born into this world, we trust that our mommy and daddy are going to take care of us and nurture us. By default, we don't know any other option. And as an interdependent species, we are dependent upon each other for our survival. And what that truly means is that we require each other to procreate. And the basis of procreation as a species means that we need to trust that we have each other's best interests in mind. Therefore, our default is we want to believe that everybody is good by their nature and that they don't mean to hurt or harm us. And so throughout the day, week, month, year, lifetime, you give the benefit of the doubt all the time. Every time you meet somebody and correspond with them in person, when they send you a text message, an email, or they call you on the phone. We want to and need to believe that others are good. And in general, they are. But the problem with that equation is that while 97% of all the people that you're ever going to meet in your life are good and are good-natured, 97%, 3 to as much as 6% aren't, that they just come out of their mama bad, that the medical community calls them antisocial personality disorders. They are the sociopaths and the psychopaths that live amongst us. They are those who do not experience, like you and I do, empathy, sympathy, remorse, guilt. They truly have no shame. And so hitting, hurting, harming, stealing is their default. Those are the bad actors that make a lot of noise. Those are the bad actors that we need to recognize that they are the risk. They're the wolves, right? And we are the rabbits. All of that dialogue is what I deliver in like an opening 20 minutes of a presentation to get people to look at what security is. It's about managing risk versus what it isn't. It's not worry and paranoia, and why you default to denial, right? Because you trust, because you don't want to think these things can happen to them, because it's kind of scary if it's not put in its proper perspective. And so as a result, we basically as a culture have done nothing to protect ourselves, And like we truly have done nothing. Most people out there are using the same passcodes. Most people out there don't have a home security system. Most people out there don't use two-factor authentication unless they have to. Most businesses are in the same boat. And you've got like one guy or one gal in the company whose job it is to make sure that the network is protected. That's the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. And he or she has an entire company of employees that don't lock the doors to their home or protect their own identity or have uncomfortable conversations with their daughter before she goes off to college about how to prevent sexual assault. They got a whole company of employees that aren't engaged in this process because nobody ever wants to think about these things or do anything about it. And that's that one person protecting the whole company.
So it's a lot of responsibility. But Robert, one thing I want to ask you, is because you've just got such an interesting history and how personal it is to you about, when you and your brother went on the subway and you were attacked by wolves, you're the rabbits, and then getting hacked, with your own company, and then that pivoting point of 9/11 in 2001. How has the cybersecurity approach evolved over the past few years? Has it changed a lot, or has it been pretty steady?
So, what has been steady is the consistent infiltration of criminal hackers into our networks. That's been steady, meaning they've extracted anywhere from, I've seen 60 billion to, I believe, as much as 175 billion records. I think it's that much based on what I've seen. And that number is debatable. And that infiltration of our information means that bad guys have access to all of our data: name, address, phone number, email address, usernames, 15 billion passwords, all of our socials, you name it, right? And they use that information against us: our phone numbers, our email addresses, all that, right? And they treat crime and fraud as a business where we don't engage it effectively at all because we don't want to think it's going to happen to us at all to begin with. It's not our job, not our responsibility. I hate dealing with passwords. Why lock my doors? I don't want to live like that, and so forth. So in the past 30 years, criminal hackers have become so much more sophisticated. Really, what they are is they're organized and they treat fraud as a business, whereas our digital literacy in regards to cybercrime is no more advanced today than it was 30 years ago. So we're just sitting ducks. We're doing almost nothing. And I'm often asked, so who's winning this battle? Is it the good guys winning or the bad guys are winning? Every single time I get off the platform, this is what I'm asked. And the answer is, well, the good guys are winning. Of course, the good guys are winning. The good guys, if the good guys weren't winning the battle, then you and I wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. We'd be living like it was the 1800s, okay? We wouldn't have functional critical infrastructures. We wouldn't have electricity. We wouldn't have clean running water. We wouldn't have, gas stations delivering gasoline so that trucks could deliver food to supermarkets with refrigeration. We would literally be living like it was the 1800s. The good guys are the reason why we have what we have and we live the quality of life that we do. The chief information security officers, those people out there at the helm, are without a doubt unequivocally the unsung heroes of our nation's infrastructure. Like people say, teachers and police officers and firefighters and nurses, first responders are our heroes, and they are. But it's the chief information security officers that truly are the heroes that are responsible for keeping the lights on, because the bad guys want us living in the dirt is what they want, okay? And they're up against an entire culture that doesn't recognize risk to the degree that they should effectively. And that's the scary part, is that now with AI and deep fakes and voice cloning, that with disinformation and the videos that you see today on YouTube and Facebook Rails and TikTok, that the lifelike human presentation that's absolutely fake, you can't tell what's real and what's fake anymore. And with humans that don't care about security to begin with, and digital media that's perfect, a perfect representation of humans saying and doing things that they didn't say and do, deep fakes, I don't know that we have a chance unless companies actually address security awareness the way that they should be, which they aren't. Right now, what they're doing is they're providing phishing simulation training as their security training, which is one small part of security training. It should be a broader discussion, as all security is personal, starting with the employee, their own identities, their own personal protection, their home security, their own social security numbers, and then get into phishing simulation training and all the risk in the corporation. And that's what has not effectively taken place yet, which is why we still see 2,000-3,000 data breaches every single year in this country.
So, Robert, for those who've now just, maybe just through this conversation, they've discovered how critical this is for them to take some more action to protect themselves. What are some practical tips you can give somebody to make sure they're better protected digitally?
I am all about practical. So the beauty of all this stuff is as much of the weeds that we just gotten into is, down the rabbit hole, so to speak. This stuff is easy. Once you look at and understand what risk actually is, which is like, putting on your seatbelt. Putting on your seatbelt is risk management. It's giving you control, right? And control is all we want as a result of engaging in basic 101 security habits. So, how would you make, and this is a question actually, how would you make a stolen password useless to a thief? How would you do that?
At first blush, I would make it unpredictable, something unrelated to me or where I live or what I do.
Yeah. So a stolen password, first thing you do is you change it, right? And change it up to something that was unrelatable, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, characters. And the beauty of that is that a password manager, a software program that you download for free or a small fee, a password manager will create a string of passwords or string of characters, 10, 15, 20 characters, uppercase, lowercase, pound sign, exclamation point, a little s, uppercase A, one, whatever, that you don't need to remember because the password manager remembers it for you. And you do that, you change up all your passcodes for all your critical accounts. You never use the same passcode twice. And the password manager facilitates that process for you. Less than 10% of the population uses a password manager. And people say, well, what if the password manager gets hacked? They're basically using a fatalism to justify why they don't use one. And the reality is the likelihood of your password manager getting hacked is pretty low versus a bad guy going to the dark web and getting your credentials off the dark web, 15 billion passwords on the dark web, and just logging in to your accounts, right? Most people don't see it as that. And so engaging in changing up your passcodes, setting up a password manager is like 101, do that first. And from there, you set up two-factor authentication for all your critical accounts. So eBay, Amazon, PayPal, email, you got to set up two-factor authentication for email and of course for everything else. And how do you do that? You Google it. You go to Google, you search Google two-factor. And on the first page, you'll see how to set up two-factor authentication for your Google account. Apple, two-factor. And right there, apple.com, how to set up two-factor authentication. PayPal, two-factor. And right there at paypal.com, how to set up two-factor authentication, you get the picture. And so once you set up password managers and two-factor authentication for all your critical accounts, you're already more secure than I'd wager 90% of the American population. Just by doing those two things, you're already doing better than 9 out of 10 people because 9 out of 10 people aren't doing that. So two-factor authentication, password managers, and then from there, as far as like your devices go, password protect all your devices, like not password protecting your phone is purely just irresponsible more than anything else. And then from there, your laptop, even if it's at home, never leaves the house, it still has to be password protected because 80% of you don't even have a home security system. So if your house gets burglarized and they get your laptop, then what? And then beyond that, obviously updating your operating system. You should be on Windows 11 at this point, whatever the latest version of Apple is, which I don't know because they use names versus numbers and I just don't remember. And update you to the latest version of your OS for your tablets and your mobile phones, whatever version of Android there is in iPhone. And doing all that stuff eliminates all the software vulnerabilities in all of your digital devices. So we have these software vulnerabilities similarly to how, like if you buy a car and there's a recall because like the airbags don't deploy like they're supposed to. And how did Toyota figure that out? Because airbags weren't deploying like they were supposed to and people got hurt and they realized that. And they sent out a recall saying, hey, airbags aren't deploying properly. Take your car back to the dealership. We'll replace it for free. Well, Microsoft, Apple, Google, right? They send out software updates, critical security updates, because people get hacked and they realize, oh, we got a vulnerability. Let's deploy a recall, a software update, so you can download to protect your data and your devices. Update your hardware, update your software, password management, two-factor authentication. And for your identity, you got to get what's called a credit freeze. So a credit freeze is not identity theft protection, but it acts as identity theft protection. And what a credit freeze does is it basically locks up your credit report. So my credit's been frozen now since 2008. And so when I want to go apply for a loan, credit card, whatever I'm going to do, I've got to temporarily thaw my credit. So what does that mean? It means that I go online and I go to TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax via my mobile phone. I just go to the apps on my phone. And from there, I just go to the app and I can go to unlock my credit or my credit temporarily based on the options that the app provides, right? So like what date do you want to thaw it? Well, maybe today. What date do you want to refreeze it? Maybe like next week, whatever it might be, whatever I got going on. And I just do that via my app. And then from that point on, I fill out the application for credit, say for the dealership because I'm going to buy a car. And then once they approve of that application for credit, which hopefully within like 24 to 48 hours, then my credit automatically freezes based on that designated time that I set it up for. So credit freezes for yourself, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. You got to do all three. Passwords management, two-factor authentication, update your software, update your hardware. And I'm telling you, you do those basic things, you're better than 90% of the population.
Robert, I've heard you mention a few times this phrase that all security is personal. Can you explain that for our audience?
Yeah. So, security, personal security is fundamentally like about protecting my physical being. It's personal security is, in fact, if you Google it, like violence prevention, or preventing violent predators, offenders from physically harming you. That's personal security. Well, if you look at my history in doing this for 30, 40 years and how I got into this game of personal protection, in personal security being violence prevention, and then me getting hacked and understanding identity theft protection. The way I look at security today is like, it doesn't make a difference if your personal security is in the physical world or the virtual world. Getting harmed in the physical world and getting harmed online is kind of the same thing. I mean, there's plenty of violence that occurs on the internet. There's plenty of theft that occurs online. And I don't know what's more secure. I'm sorry, I don't know what's more personal to me than my identity. So all security being personal is based on the philosophy that people protect what they love. They love their loved ones. They love themselves. I mean, it's important to love yourself, right? And if you look at security as being personal and to protect what's personal to you, you're going to do a much better job protecting your child's identity, let's say, or your bank account or your spouse in their identity. And when we reframe security from that perspective, people do a much more effective job at protecting themselves and their loved ones, and the information that they are entrusted with. Essentially, it's the core belief that people protect what they love. By teaching someone to protect their child's digital footprint, you create a more secure employee.
So you had mentioned one of the trends you're seeing, part of the evolution is we as human beings tend to be maybe a little bit complacent, while the scammers or the people trying to get to our information are becoming more savvy. So how has that trend impacted your business or growth strategy? Is it just the lay of the land, or is there something that is it making you more busier because people are now more exposed than ever?
So, hold on one second. Sorry about that. So, prior to COVID, right? I'm like a 1.5 million miler on Delta Diamond Medallion, airplanes, hotels, airports, constantly on the road getting in front of live audiences. COVID hit, and then, flatline, nothing. No more speaking in front of live audiences. I fed the family by doing a lot of virtual learning, obviously, live stuff online. But, we're a social creature. We want to interact. We want to, like me and you, like have a conversation. We don't want to necessarily just, watch something online. You don't raise your family by, say, hey, watch this video. You have a dialogue. And so as social creatures, I started to get a lot of, phone calls and emails around 2023 where, chief information security officers are reaching out and saying, hey, we've been doing the whole compliance-based training, phishing simulation training for long enough, and we've kind of plateaued a little bit. We just want our employees ultimately to care about security. And what we've found is the compliance-based phishing simulation training is a bit like putting the cart before the horse. It's providing them with this information about all these risks, about how to protect company data, but we haven't yet talked to the employee about how to protect themselves and their families and their identity and their daughter who goes off to college. And so by getting the employee up to speed that all security is personal and teaching them and training them on how to protect themselves first, then they begin to see how the training they're getting at work on phishing simulation training also benefits them at home too. And I call this the kitchen table effect. So it's when employees take what they've learned at work and now they go home and they explain all of that stuff to their family, thereby solidifying the information and cementing it for life, you know? And that transition started happening around 2023. Hey, can you just get our people to care about security? That's all we want, so that they are engaged in phishing simulation training that much more effectively. And that's what I do. I am actually the horse before the cart, so to speak. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of like if you are going to do this, like, multi-mile hike in the woods that you've never done before, and you've got a map. Well, wouldn't it be better if you actually sat down with that map with a guide who can actually explain to you the trail and what you're going to see as you go through that map? That when you get to this particular point, there's going to be a ridge, and over that ridge, there's going to be a body of water to the left. And then to the right, you're going to see these series of rocks and trees. And right there, you want to make sure to take a left, because otherwise you're going to get confused, and so forth, right? So it's having that guide, which is what I do, that allows the employee to navigate security effectively. So when they encounter risk, they know what they're looking at. They understand it because they've kind of been there already. So that, since 2023, 2025 was my best year in the books since pre-COVID, because companies are realizing they need to make a shift because it's just not working like it was before. And the risks are greater today. The attack surface is bigger. And what that means is we're not just working at work, we're working from home, many of us. And the attack surface means it's not just the surface, meaning the devices at work, it's the devices at home, bigger attack surface. There's more devices, there's more places that we can attack the user, the employee. And, the employee needs to know how to protect themselves at home as much as they do at work, because work is now at home.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if there's something to maybe at home being more relaxed, or maybe you might fall for a deep fake because the security is not as complete as it would be in an office environment. But all these things make the attacks so much more convincing through AI and artificial intelligence. But on the flip side, is there a problem that you think AI or automation can solve for a business like yours?
So the beauty of AI is that it certainly scales everything. It allows for the chief information security officer, in my case, right, to provide technology that anticipates risk. It's looking for a number of factors that, say, just a few years ago, it would require that human to observe those factors and say, hey, here's an anomaly, here's an issue. And therefore, if you do the math behind that anomaly and this issue, it could lead to this. Now AI does that for you. AI calculates all of those anomalies, all those risks, understands them in a mathematical formula, and presents its findings. And that presentation might be in securing whatever vulnerability it has determined there is, which is wonderful. That's what AI in security does. And that, of course, that same calculation can be done in sales and in marketing and in, formulating a diet or a plan to run a marathon or anything, and how to manage a broken relationship. I mean, you name it, and how to scale your business. And so there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. From my perspective, what I am seeing and what I'm speaking to in regards to the security aspect of risk and how AI can be used against us is that for the user, for the employee, for the consumer, for you and I, when your phone rings and you hear your daughter on the phone in the background screaming, desperate, what you don't realize is somebody's gone to her, Instagram page, and they've grabbed her voice, her likeness, and they've cloned it, and they're posing as her using voice cloning technology. And then a man gets on the phone saying that your daughter is being kidnapped and you've got to pay this so many dollars in ransom to get her back. And like, you're freaking out because every cell in your body hears your daughter on the phone, not realizing it's an AI deep fake, a clone of her. So AI has really stripped away all the clumsy red flags of traditional fraud is what it's done. In the past, criminals relied on what we call blunder force phishing. Mass blasting of emails riddled with scammer grammar. And today, generative AI allows for high, precise impersonation. It's perfect what it does at scale, and criminals now use what we call neural puppetry to create perfect lies by scraping just seconds of a person's data online, voice, likeness. That voice cloning impersonates that trusted source like a spouse, a CEO, loved one, an attorney, with, at this point, 95% to 100% accuracy. It's just about perfect at this point. This weaponizes our biological default to trust, that human blind spot that we speak to, making the deception 100% human or feel 100% human, right? And AI automates what we call the grooming process, which essentially is, normalizing dialogue that, like, when you get that text message, hey, Robert, are we meeting for lunch tomorrow? And it's basically a scammer trying to connect with you. That over time is all done by AI. And there's a grooming process that involves the person that's now responding to this person 6 to 8 times a day to get them emotionally involved with the scammer. That's the grooming that we speak to, right? That building rapport is focusing on like a lot of lonely people, which like 25% of the world's population wakes up every day and is lonely, right? And so AI removes the manual labor of social engineering, allowing a single predator to pilot thousands of digital puppets, so to speak, all at the same time, bypassing all technical firewalls and hacking humans at an unprecedented level. That's my biggest concern today with scammers and fraud and how they're using the technology at their fingertips, at our fingertips, to take advantage of us. And unless we essentially smarten up and recognize risk as we should, paranoia, it's putting systems in place, it's getting control, it's becoming a tougher target, it's becoming the top 10%, password management, two-factor authentication, credit freezes, update your hardware, update your software, basic stuff. And you become a tougher target. And recognize every time the phone rings, an email comes in, a text message, even though you have what we call the human blind spot, you trust by default, you don't need to. You can engage in a bit of strategic thinking. I call it the strategic human firewall. I go from, I trust what I see to I verify everything, then you're good. That's what we should be doing, which we're not doing enough or effectively enough.
Well, Robert, we've covered so many great points today, and this has been invaluable for the audience. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I've been saying for 30 years at the end of my presentations, don't worry about any of this stuff. What good is that? Just do something about it. Like literally, just do something about it. Just take action. The worst thing you can do is nothing. What I'm also saying is, although today I am a bit worried due to AI and deep fakes and voice cloning, and if we don't get a handle on ourselves and recognizing and embracing risk in doing something about it, then I am a little worried about what AI can and will do, because I'm seeing firsthand people being victimized for 6 and 7 figures, like people like you and I, like our moms and dads, like I've hugged and cried with people who have lost $600,000, $700,000 in scams where they thought they were communicating with somebody who had their best interests in mind. And that's what worries me. Like at the rate of the loss that I'm seeing, the high dollar amounts for everyday people, it used to be companies would lose that kind of money, not people, now it's everyday people. So I'm a little bit worried there, but we don't have to worry if we just do something about it. So share this podcast with everybody in your life.
So for those chief information security officers or directors of IT or CEOs who now would like to get a hold of you and pursue this further and find out more, how can they get a hold of you?
So easy to find. If you can spell Siciliano, I'm all over the webs, LinkedIn, wherever, or my website, protectnowllc.com, Protect Now LLC.
Well, on behalf of the audience, I'd like to thank you a ton. So, guys, as we wrap up, I want to remind everybody that this is the AI Surge podcast. I'm your host, Serge Uppel. Robert Siciliano is, as you can tell, a number one best-selling author and a strategic human firewall and founder of the Protect Now LLC, a company out of Boston, Massachusetts, and a real pleasure and a real subject matter expert. So, Robert, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you.
Take care.